Hi, my name is Tanya Elder, and I am 44 years old. I live in the Bronx, and I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I guess I have two stories to combine in a way to give you some background on certain things that happen to me, my background. I was born in Detroit to African American parents. And as you could probably tell, I'm a little light skinned. And I used to ask my mom if I was adopted because I had heard things from relatives, and I kind of didn't look like anybody else in the family, so I was like, what's going on here, huh? And my mom used to always tell me that I looked like my grandfather. Great, fine, it's no problem. He was light skinned also. Well, it comes to find out later on in life, as I needed to have a birth certificate to get a driver's license when I moved from Detroit to New York. I moved to Philadelphia for a little while, and I had to then move back to New York and get a driver's license in the state of New Jersey where I was staying. And because of that, I had to have a driver's license a birth certificate in order to actually get the driver's license at that time. Well, my mom said I have to go to Lansing to get the driver's license, the birth certificate. I don't have a copy of it. You've lost yours. I don't know where it is. And I was like, why do you have to go to Lansing? Why can't you just go to downtown Detroit and get it? And she finally said, well, it's because you're adopted. Okay, great. But I found out it's a pretty interesting story. My birth mother and father were in the Peace Corps in 1963. They were in Pakistan. He was black, she was white. They were both very idealistic people, apparently in Peace Corps in 1963. That's idealism at its height. And they were lonely, and one thing after another happened, and lo and behold, here I am. But just remember, my mother did not tell me this until I was 33 years old. So I love my mom to death, but she does have a tendency to do stuff like that. But what this story is really about is a ghost. And, some people go, ghost stories are not true. It can't be true. There's no such thing as ghosts. And when people say that to me, I don't say yay or nay. I just shake my head and maybe, maybe not. Because when I was a kid, my mom and dad, my adopted parents, Ethel and Edward, were amazing people. They actually were able to, in the 1950s in Detroit, move from the South and come up to Detroit and actually buy their own business and run that business for a number of years. My father owned a bar. It's called the Moonglow Lounge. It was in Detroit for a long time, and I remember fondly going in there all the time as a kid to listen to the bands that used to play, or listen to the jukebox, or the guys playing dominoes and the people playing pool. It's why I know how to play pool today. It's because of my dad's bar. And my mother owned a barbecue restaurant. So for a long time, the restaurant closed at 1, the bar closed at 2 in the morning. And for a long time, I had to actually go to the bar, or actually to the restaurant. I would sleep on top of a big deep freezer and eventually a cot, deep freezer cot, depending on if it was cold outside or hot outside. If it was cold outside, I would, be on the heater, basically, the giant deep freezer, because it was kind of warm, But anyway, and this went on for a long period of time. And by the time I got into 5th or 6th grade, 6th or 7th grade actually, I was like every kid in Detroit in the 70s, I wanted to be by myself. I wanted to be able to babysit myself. And we had babysitters, and I guess things happened, not personal things, but things that my mom wasn't very happy with the babysitters, and I don't remember whatever. And I somehow convinced my parents to let me stay at home by myself while they were in the bar or the restaurant working. And they worked their butts off. They worked day and night. They worked all the time. And finally they relented. Now, I lived at this house. The address was 1919 Warrington, or 19191 Warrington in Detroit, Michigan. Still stands. Sometimes I drive by it now and I'm like, ooh, I wonder what's going on there. So I used to stay in this house, and I loved it. It was a great house. It had like 12 rooms. It had a full basement, a living room, dining room, breakfast nook, den, dining room, 3 bedrooms upstairs, a little sewing room. It was a great house. The backyard was amazing. I mean, had this row of bushes in the back that you can actually, as a kid, go under, walk under between the bushes and the fence. And it's like a little forest back there. It was great. I loved this place. But eventually, I'm staying in the house by myself, having a great time. I mean, like a kid being by themselves, having a great time. Yeah, I'm gonna watch TV. I'm gonna take myself to sleep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm here by myself now. All right, I'm here by myself now. Nice. And I start to go to sleep. And I go to my parents' room because it's the only door that really locks. Got to have the door locked just in case anything happens. And for about 3 or 4 months, it was really great. It was really great for about 3 or 4 months. Until, the footsteps started. And I would be in my parents' room, door locked, about to go to sleep. And I would hear, kush, 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 all the way to the door of my parents' room, where the footsteps would stop, turn back around, and come back up and go back down. Occasionally, I would go outside and I would outside the door and I would look, and the creaking of the stairs would still happen while I was standing there. I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on. So I asked my mom, and she said, I really think it's an old house settling. That's a good story. It's an old house. It's settling. It settles. Of course, to me, I'm like, it settles one step at a time, all the way to the door. Oh, yeah, it's settling. It's settling, all right. So apparently that wasn't enough to scare me. So eventually, I started seeing in the kitchen. The kitchen was in the center of the house, central to the house. The den was on one side, the breakfast nook was on the other, and the entrance from the vestibule to the downstairs basement to the kitchen was on the other side. So I would occasionally be in the kitchen, or in the breakfast nook, or in the den, or in the vestibule, and if I turned around really quickly, I would see out of the corner of my eyes a skeletal figure in a kilt. Now, okay. I was really well-read child as a kid, and I knew what a kilt was, and I damned well knew what a skeleton was. And occasionally I would try to test myself, and sometimes it would happen, sometimes it wouldn't. And of course, my parents were still going to work every night, and I was still staying home every night. And I'd be in the den watching television, and all of a sudden I would hear footsteps coming out of the basement. Coming out of the basement, kush, kush, kush. Stopping between the hallway of the vestibule and the kitchen, and go back downstairs. All right. Okay, maybe the house is now settling downstairs as well as settling upstairs. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it all out. I'm asking my mother. She's not saying that she sees anything. My dad is just like, what? And I just kept seeing a skeleton in a kilt. And I really, at this point, don't care if you believe me or not, but that is what I saw, a skeleton in a kilt. Now, of course, my parents wouldn't be working all the time. Occasionally they would be home, and I would sleep in my room. And I don't really remember exactly why I stopped sleeping in my room, but after a while I started sleeping. It might have been too cold in there, or the heat wasn't working, or something like that. I can't really remember. But I started sleeping in the guest bedroom that had 2 full beds and had this, I think it was probably the original wallpaper, and it was a scene of a French provincial scene of a man and a woman. The woman's in a swing, swinging back and forth. The man's pushing her. It's blue, very porcelain-like looking. And because there was a street light right outside or in the backyard, I would have the shades pulled down because the light would actually stream right into the room, or the curtains drawn. And after a little bit, I noticed on the wall there was the shape of a face, but it wasn't a face. It was actually a skeleton. So imagine the white of the skull. The eyes were hollowed. It was black. The mouth was black. There was a little part here that was also black, where the cartilage is actually gone, and, you just have a hole down in your skull. And so I would go and lift the door, the blinds and the curtains, and the skeleton was still there. So I started getting really kind of freaked out by then. And I started getting so freaked out that I told my parents that I could not stay in the house by myself anymore. I mean, my mother, I kept asking her if she had seen anything. She kept saying no. And again, my dad, and it's just like a dad. He's like, yeah, sure, whatever, kid. I just couldn't do it anymore. I was so sad. I was so sad when I had to go back to the bar. Actually, it was the restaurant. I keep saying the bar, but we lived over my father's bar later on. And when I was in 8th grade. So I had to go back to the restaurant, which means I had to get up, I had to sleep in the restaurant, and then get up when we came back home, and then go to school the next morning. But I kept seeing that skeleton. And one night, we came back from the restaurant, and the house had been broken into. This was like 2 weeks after I stopped going. And the room where I stayed in, my parents' room, was of course the room that was basically targeted. And pretty much, if I had not been scared shitless, I would have been there when the house was broken into. So I guess when I was about 18 years old, I asked my mom, I said, Mom, do you remember the house at 1919 Warrington? That was the house that we all just really loved, and I still loved it despite Ghost. And I said, Mom, did you ever, come on, you used to tell me you never saw something. Did you ever see anything in there? Please, just tell me the truth. Because remember, my mother didn't tell me until I was 33 that I was adopted, so she sometimes love her to death. She doesn't tell me everything, as a parent doesn't anyway. And she goes, Tanya, I didn't want to scare you, but yes, I used to also see in the house a skeleton in a kilt. And I was like, Ma, you could have told me earlier. And she said, well, let me just tell you this. When we bought the house, we were the 3rd owners. And we found out the first owner actually was the person who built the house in the 30s. And he had fallen upon really hard times. And he hung himself in the kitchen. And he was of Scottish descent. And they did not find his body for a very long time. So shortly after she told me this, I had a dream. I was a little girl again, and I was standing at the top of the stairs outside of my parents' bedroom, and I see a skeleton's head come up the stairs toward me. And it said, "Are you okay? Are you okay? I just wanted to make sure that you were okay." And I woke the hell up after that. And it's a true story.